Good day, all. This is TurboDave here at Performance Corner. Today we're going to be talking to you about a 3VZ engine with a MISFIRE. If it's in our T100, you might have seen our other video on the knock sensor, the code 52. This one, it also had other problems when it came in. It had a hard misfire. So we're going to go over misfires. This works across the board, but on this one, the 3VZ, there's a few things that might be slightly different. Generally speaking, it's the same. So this one had a misfire, had a code 52, and we talked about that in the other video. This one had a hard misfire, and it felt like a dead cylinder. It was so bad. Once you're on the freeway, it was fine, but you could feel it missing pretty good. We did a simple balance test by pulling the coil wire off of each spark plug one at a time. Found out what cylinders were strong and what cylinders were weak. When you're looking for a weak cylinder, it's going to have the least amount of change when you disable the ignition. So if you pull the wire or the electrical portion off a coilover plug engine and you pull off that cylinder, if it doesn't make a big difference, it's not contributing very much to your engine. If it does make a big difference, it's a large contributor to your engine. So in this case, we found out cylinders 1 and 3, which is a passenger side front cylinder and middle cylinder, were the ones that had the least amount of change. So we started getting into that immediately. Also, we did a valve adjustment. Well, we checked the valves. We checked the valves on all the cylinders just to make sure they were all looking good. We adjusted a few valves. That one specifically was very tight. It was held open. There's actually a slight gap. The funny thing about this was on those, when you you have to actually hold the valve open to take the old shim out. So there's a cam here, and you have the round top part of the valve, and there's a shim that slides in there. It's literally a round shim that is very different thicknesses depending on what you need. So I got it out. The tool actually slipped out while it was holding it open, and it slammed shut. No big deal. But when I put the new shim in that was supposed to be the right size, I noticed it was too tight. There was zero gap still. So I had to find another shim that was gonna give it the correct clearance that it needed. So I found one that was pretty thin. I got it in there, and we were able to take a clean measurement because it actually had a gap now. What I realized was, you think, how could the valve be held open still, with a shim in it, when all of a sudden you put a thinner shim in it and it's closed? So it definitely had some carbon buildup, and it could have been because the valve was tuliping. It's what they call sinking. And it happens, it's very common on these 3VZ engines. First you start doing the valve adjustment by changing the shim to a thinner one, and as they keep going, you just have to change the valve. This particular car is a family member's, so we did change some valves, but I didn't change all the valves at the time. So I had to reshim it. Well, we reshimmed a few of them, got the tolerances right, definitely ran better. Another thing that happened when it first came in was, because it did have a misfire, when I took the engine apart to get down to the knock sensor and get some parts and stuff, I had taken the injectors and had them cleaned. There was one injector specifically that was held open. It was just constantly dripping, and you could tell when you first started the truck, you'd start it and it was really misfiring, and then you'd rev it up and it would shoot out a bunch of gas, and as it warmed up, it cleaned up. So I suspected that cylinder had the bad injector. So after they sonic cleaned it and they pressured it and they ran fluid through it and everything, they all balanced out the same. They got them all balanced. So we put it all back together. In the midst of fixing the code 52 and doing all that stuff, we got this all back together and test drove it. It ran much better. But on the long test drive that I took it on, I noticed that all of a sudden it lost power. It lost a significant amount of power, actually. And I'm coming back, things misfiring worse. And so I started checking. I'm thinking, what could this be? Check the injectors. If I could get to them, I was pulsing. I actually used first a stethoscope. and so I could hear it pulsing. I noticed this one didn't have a pulse, and so I wanted to check it. I have an electronic unit you plug onto the injector, and you can manually inject or manipulate the injector. So I did that to a couple of them just to see if what they sounded like, the good ones, and then there was a bad one. So I took it off, did it again on the bench, didn't work. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't working. I wasn't gonna put it on for and have this intermittent issue with it. So I ordered a new one. It's like $117. Put it on, and the truck ran great. The carbon buildup on the valves, so where the valve meets the valve seat, I believe that's where it was building up carbon, and it could be a number of things. Without getting into the vehicle and start tearing the engine apart, you're looking at a possible valve guide seal or valve guide leaking. There can be, more than likely that's it on that side, or it can be oil coming up from the piston rings, from the piston, the cylinder. The pressure from the crankcase blows oil by, and you get blow by. What happens there is the rings over time start to get stuck, and they stuck into the piston, and so you have the oil control rings on the bottom, and they get tight, and then you have the compression rings, and they probably have gotten tight over the time, or worn, and same goes for the oil control rings. So you end up with oil blowing by, and the deposits from oil and the hardening and overheating and stuff like that over time, old oil, not changing it frequently, you get those kind of deposits, and they start holding the piston rings in place. And then on the valves, you get the kind of deposits either coming from there or dripping down from the top of the valve, and then settling in there. And then on the I think that was the exhaust one that got held open. So and the exhaust gets hot, and you get the oil deposits here, and it cooks on, and so they just stack on top of each other. And then when your valve gets held open, maybe it already started tuliping and it held open a little bit, so you start getting these deposits there, and there's no contact, so they're not going to clean up at all. So I didn't do induction cleaning, complete induction cleaning. I sprayed a little bit while I was running. But what I did do after we got the shimming, the valve tolerances right, and we got the injectors all working correctly, and obviously the knock sensor got repaired and fixed, I did an oil change on this. And so what I did was I used a BG Products oil. I really like BG Products. They're great stuff. And so you put this ERP stuff or EPR stuff inside the engine, and it cleans all the deposits. And so I did usually when you're going to change the oil, you pour this into your old oil, and then you just run it and rev it, for 10-15 minutes, and then drain it, and it takes a lot of the deposits out. But being as this one has extremely high miles, it's a very pretty old car, and it doesn't get driven daily, so it's never seeing a lot of heat cycles where it can clean itself and do everything it needs to do. It's a lot of short trips, and doesn't get driven a lot long distances where it can go through heat cycles. So I took it, I got it heated up, drained all the old oil out. It was very dirty. Changed the oil filter, put new, very cheap, the cheapest conventional oil I could find in it, new oil filter, again, not expensive, and added the BG Products into it to clean the oil, and I got it heated up. Actually, I ran the oil first to get the oil heated up, and then I put the BG Products in. Ran it for actually like 25 minutes. You're not supposed to drive it. This one I drove around the block a couple times, trying to clean it a little bit more. I ran it for about 25 minutes though. Mostly just high idle, down low, and then revving it and stuff like that a little bit. Drain the oil. So within a half hour, that oil being in there with the additive from BG Products, the oil looked like it'd gone a full cycle, 3,000 miles or 4,000 miles. It was quite dirty. So it took out a lot of the contaminants in there. I don't know how much it really cleaned out, the pistons and stuff, but it may not have loosened all the rings, but we'll probably have to do it again. But the truck ran like a champ. I mean, considering it was 27 years old actually, and almost 300,000 miles. Yeah, that thing ran pretty good. So if you're having issues and stuff like that, and you know, it can be compounding issues. You know, this was multiple issues happening on, for whatever reason, the same cylinder. You know, an injector isn't really directly connected to the internal part of the engine on that same cylinder. It just happened that it failed on that same cylinder that was having issues with the valve lash, you know, at the same time. So, but those are the few things that you need to look out for. And 3VZ, you have to get the shims. A lot of cars you have to get the shims actually, but the 3VZ has a big shim, and it takes some work and time to do it. And you have to rotate the engine going from different valve to different valves. So, you know, it's not like you just set the engine up and then you go through it. You do have to rotate the engine to make sure the cam is in the correct position. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section below, and we'd appreciate it if you like this video or you watch our other videos and find them informative or just fun to hit the subscribe button, please. Helps us out tremendously, and we will see you the next time we have a video and some knowledge to spread to our viewers. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you then.